In the quiet heart of rural America, one man stood between his family's legacy and a corrupt HOA president. What began as a peaceful day on the farm quickly spiraled into a battle over land, power, and identity. This is the true story of how a simple farmer took on fraud, exposed a web of lies, and reminded an entire community of what really matters. Stay with us because justice has deep roots. It started on a blistering July afternoon, the kind that makes the horizon shimmer like it's on fire. I was out by the barn, sweat pooling under my shirt when I heard the sirens. Not loud, but close. Too close. Moments later, two sheriff cruisers rolled down my gravel driveway, tires crunching against the silence of the countryside. Behind them came a black SUV, shiny enough to reflect the sky. Out stepped Karen Williams, the president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She looked wildly out of place. High heels sinking into the dirt, crisp white blouse unsuited for rural life, and a smirk on her face that made my stomach churn. She strutted across my field like she owned it. Then, in front of the officers and without flinching, she accused me of trespassing on my own land. "This property no longer belongs to you," she said coolly, holding up a folder like it was a badge of power. According to these documents, the farm was sold to the Johnsons 2 weeks ago. "You are illegally occupying private property." I couldn't even form words at first. This farm had been in my family for over 80 years. My grandfather built the farmhouse with his own hands. My father died planting those pecan trees. Every fence post, every broken tool in the shed, it all had meaning. Now this woman, who lived 3 blocks away in a gated development, was trying to erase that with a stack of forged papers. The officers looked uneasy. They asked if I had proof of ownership. I nodded and invited them inside. Karen followed uninvited, spewing nonsense about the HOA having jurisdiction over surrounding land due to some easement clause. She accused me of being a visual nuisance that devalued nearby properties. She called my barn an eyesore, my goats a health hazard. Inside, I showed the deed, property tax records, photographs of my family through the decades standing on this very soil. One officer's expression began to shift. The other remained guarded. Karen, on the other hand, grew more agitated. "None of that matters," she snapped. "The HOA filed paperwork. The sale is final." That was when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. 2 days later, a real estate agent named Christopher Reynolds knocked on my door. He handed me a copy of a sale contract, my forged signature at the bottom. I stared at it, stunned. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. "I called my lawyer, Sandy Parker, and filed a fraud report with the county sheriff." Karen had clearly expected me to fold, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. Over the next week, Sandy and I dug through every document we could find. The contract was riddled with inconsistencies, fake notary stamps, non-existent escrow accounts, altered county forms. Karen had built an entire web of lies, but she hadn't covered her tracks well. We weren't alone either. News of what happened spread fast. Turns out, I wasn't her only target. Other farmers along the edge of Oak Ridge Estates had also received suspicious letters, buyout offers, and, in one case, notices claiming eminent domain under community beautification plans. All traced back to Karen. That's when the tide turned. One by one, neighbors came forward. Old Man Rogers, whose wife had died on their land 3 years prior, told how Karen had tried to bribe him into selling. Maria Delgado, a single mother who raised chickens, revealed surveillance photos Karen had taken of her coop, claiming it violated HOA aesthetics, even though her property lay outside the HOA's reach. The community rallied: farmers, mechanics, shop owners. Even people from town who had no skin in the fight showed up to local council meetings. We stood together and told our stories. And suddenly, Karen's power began to erode. The sheriff's department launched a formal investigation. They traced the forged documents back to Karen's home printer. Emails surfaced, showing Karen and Christopher plotting to artificially devalue farmland so Oak Ridge Estates could buy it cheap and resell it to developers. The Johnsons turned out to be her cousin and his wife, both of whom had prior records for real estate fraud. Karen was arrested on charges of forgery, criminal impersonation, and attempted grand larceny. Christopher Reynolds was disbarred and fined heavily for his involvement. It felt like a dam had finally burst, years of manipulation crashing down in a single sweep. But justice wasn't the only thing I walked away with. That week, as I stood outside the courthouse after Karen's arraignment, people came up to shake my hand. They brought me eggs, pie, fresh bread. Someone left a note on my tractor that said, "Thanks for standing your ground. You reminded us what this place is really about." I didn't realize until then just how close we had come to losing it all. Not just my farm, but our way of life. Karen's plan had been slow, deliberate, but she underestimated the strength of memory, of roots sunk deep in the soil. She thought we were just people on plots of land, but we were more than that. We were stewards of legacy. When the court finally ruled in my favor, nullifying all forged transactions and restoring full ownership to my name, I stood in my kitchen and cried for the first time in years. Not out of fear or anger, but relief. The land was safe. My family's story would continue. Karen's house went up for sale a month later. No one really noticed when she left. It was like the community silently agreed to erase her, the same way she tried to erase us. And me, I went back to fixing fences, feeding goats, mending what was broken. But every morning, when I step out and smell the dew on the fields, I feel something deeper. This isn't just land, it's memory, it's family. It's proof that even in the face of greed and lies, truth can hold the line, and in this town, we hold it together.